Hiroshima. Part 1. One morning, it was Golgotha somehow outside my window, and it was night there, and there were crowds of people in top hats laughing and poking sticks into ashes as if to level the ground. And when I went down, there was round blood on the grass blades instead of dew, but only in certain places. And when I looked up, I thought it was a goat nailed to the cross, its head like a balanced rock ready to topple, swaying a little, too big for the body, somehow, and looking down a long way at me. There had been a fire in the night, because the walls of the garden were rust red and black and white in places. And the town over the wall also had felt fire in its rafters and cellars. A pregnant woman said she could not remember when it was, but told me Zion also lay in a coma. But the walls were rust red and black, and a thin choir of white-faced children sang a most cheerful hymn, and suddenly whistled it, and stuck on one note, and held it. There was wind whining across the desert. And they sat on the green grass where the church was before the fire, or played hopscotch in the aisle, or played guns with the blown-up pipes of the organ. I remember it was cold. Today, I believe every city has Zion in the holy part of the city, and the Golgotha stands somewhere, knitted in with the streets, or under the foundations of a new bakery. And likewise, mostly unknown in most of the cities, there's a place of sanctity trodden on, places where uncrowned Christs suffered and died, unknown. A place also where kisses hurt, coins rendered to Caesar and to the fountains, gardens and parks where middle-aged men spend their despair in raincoats, a place where scaffolding collapsed and delinquents stole a censer from a burning church, and corners almost built for a kind of waiting, a story written in the initials etched in places of interest and occasion in the hidden brick. We know little of these undeniable histories, but remember outlines of our own, though few of us surely had much real occasion to laugh, save those of us the hammered nail missed. But laughing is only another way of weeping, when you think of it. We close the door against the gale we know will smash the door if it cares to. In my garden, a tree grew crooked. A rose went black in the veins of some of the leaves, and we children laughed for a time, but later forgot to mow the grass. with this briar rose in my hand. I am here in this city, suddenly alive to the slums of my leader's city. There was nowhere to lie down, to listen to a loving voice in the darkness. No place to cry in, save a place where fountains played. I suppose it is hard for one has no understanding where God is, to understand that God no longer holds the thunderbolt as Zeus did. The bolt has God in its fist and shatters him on the pagan Ares, along with all his unthroned predecessors. Ice bound there, Atlas has friends in the sky shouldering massifs of the dead gods. I heard nothing but the cold waves and distant cries of burning cities. There for my entertainment all the while I had the wild swan song and unnatural flashes in the sky. For men's laughter I had the gannet's cry and the unhappy faces of impersonal streets, and the curlew. For my drink I had the singing of a girl. Yes, I had that, and had the acrid fumes of the Blitz. I was born in the midst of it, and something incites me into the haunts of dolphins, irresistibly deep into the sea world. But I need Orphic sea sway to lay the waves low, so that the seahorse mains blow no more wild on the running ridges and the stones, and so cities sway no more. I have been too sea-struck a gleeman, too spray-dumbed and foundering, too bound to the dashing barrel of the ocean to rise up, call, and lead the way alone. And cities broke my heart. I saw the scaffold on St. Paul's, a city's heart in need of help, and paid builders with coarse brushes and water scrubbing the stone clean of the city's smoke, risen from men's grey minds and rising. The city learnt to love the old things in the city, craving to preserve each former masterpiece. How gingerly they lifted out the unexploded shell from the heart of the Blitz. And in the white wards, the wrecks of toiling bodies moan, as the bones ache to the core always, and the surgeons slave to save the blood beating out with the muscles of the kicking red heart, and silver clamps in the glaring theatres. One man's sick heart struggles and slithers there, and fingers seeming to grope under the water slip from the task, often through 7 hours of skill and perspiration. 7 men perhaps in green smocks and red-stained rubber gloves, all moving nearer to death. And the saved heart beats somewhat safer afterwards in the ward. Today he dies a natural death, sitting in the garden. Or an old man dying under the crab, reconciled to the cause and that way end. Loathly to him to open his eyes again in the white ward he took farewell of, when they told him sleep was nigh. He saw salvation in narcotic balm, given daily at the fixed hour, recurring, knowing also deep down that killers of pain addict and kill quicker also other organs, one by one. Heaven is a white room, with men lying there all along in iron beds, and hell is a white room, with men lying awake at night when the night nurse doesn't come. Heaven and hell are always other kinds of living, it seems. If I believe in departure to whatever, to what heaven, to hell, I'll never die from this pain. If only I could not be walking in this street, not hearing the horns and brakes always, not frowning at the lights which seek to lay bare the brain's qualities and announce them nightly on the sides of tall buildings, the lights which hurt my eyes. And yet, to fly as a crow flies, how much more beautiful are those shining towers which challenge the grey dome of St. Paul's in the city's stone heart than the grey dome of St. Paul's. And yet, how fallible as wren's dream. On the base of one of Memnon's monuments, thrown there in the Valley of Kings, tourists from Athens in days of old carved their names for love of what was older. No, somehow to share their millennium. And we all cling to a collapsing past and lay our stone on the lurching cairn and cherish ruins. Oh, bright cup, we have always cried, and have built up flying buttresses against our myths to make us less ashamed of our inhuman origin. Gone, golden age, we cry. O chain-mailed warrior, glory of kings and gods, how the times have passed, how they grow dark under night's shadows as though they had never been there. And we marvel at the transitory world. Nothing stays here, neither ourselves nor the things we try so hard to hold. We lift the faces of our buildings, mend the weathers as it burns in the stone, forgetting the industry of the Grand Canyon, and not knowing that twice already in the earth's story rains have laid all the mountains low, and Cambria's twice been under the sea. Staring hard into our friends' eyes, we sink our struggling bodies to the neck in relics and blind love of the old. Therefore, cities, break my heart and my own city in the year's fall, and ruins heave my heart no more when I think of ruins. For nothing new moves in the land, no room for us to scan the world and conjure dreams ahead as the air burns up. Even the stars we gaze at are their shining histories light-year eons ago. Past binds us, past strangles us with the little things we love, because they lend us permanence against our dying. Find me a way to sleep and wake up free of this interminable museum. Someone to scrape up cities from the earth as gardeners shovel manure up from the country lanes that roses prosper. Someone to scan the rose and coin a song. Truly, I have searched in many yards and gardens, but I found no man until I looked up into the white clouds. Part 2. And Einstein, when the clouds had moved away, was there. And Einstein, the lines curving parabola up from the outside edge of his absolute human eyes, removes, with a winsome smile, his glasses. From the outside time-white edge of the nimbus mane of his great head, and lays down lovingly on the oracle pages before him, next to the striped deck chair, his glasses lovingly down on the deck. And from the wheel room of his miraculous steady ship, binnacle utterly inert in respect to his always scrutiny of the field and the huge energy held there under the cranium, Einstein, weeping over the wonder and the horror of the chain-brilliant reaction flushing through the white-green Uranian chasms, cried over the water, "No, not this for war, not war, or only to bring war altogether to an end. For far better is the deep down still world of the deep Pacific, dearly down there, cool from the sun's indiscriminate will, yet warm from the inner furnace of the shrieking earth. Down there, if only the down there were here, where we are, for us to live in, not as the dolphins live, restless where the two worlds meet, but for us to live as gentle, thinking people with minds alive in our wonder. I have looked on the bright, bright side and know the dark. Therefore, not this now for war. Christ's kingdom in this wicked miracle come shall split from end to end in a cacophony of cracked atoms. The city crumbled instantaneously. Whole armies of men who came to rebuild it fell dead to the earth. Geiger forbade them. But something will aboriginals learn after, even if such deadly living dust radiates the world in the trade winds. There shall be books enough left to learn from, and brains of men. Or we may learn anew another way, knowing merely that fishing boats float out there always where there is water for fishes, Pacific. Minds may begin with a notion of floating, and movement be understood from immobility. Einstein's mind, his miracle, lies in the still dark of tangible objects, in the luminosity of clocks in the dark, in the unutterable contingent of the truth that were I to exact all the fire held in the cells of my right hand, I could lay mountains low, and I could split wide the wide earth open with my little fingernail. I could play catch with stars, and I could rise up, call, and lead the way alone. One stone, one pebble on the quiet shore holds city wreck. Therefore I peruse a long while on the seashore. One stone, but my right hand lies dormant and low, sometimes a fist, and sometimes an open palm. And my mind, having marvelled at great things to do and to think of, turns to another way of seeing, purely a winsome thought, a layman's whim, but as much as the oracle was. When the mind, having marvelled at the things undeniably done and thought of by his oracle, considers the horizons, and the horizons, and the horizons, scanned and touched by Einstein's hand. He, reaching out in the dark, once touched Christ's hand, and Christ came alive and held his hand through all the galactic memory and experience of a minute. And I say Christ, because I found in Einstein's incantation salvation for the world. He knew the dark and shot light there where the dark was. He opened the window cannily wide for the bat-blind birds to come in, but could not call them or gently hold them in his human hands gently to explain. And they flew in the dark without the spittle. They flew in the light, and therefore without the charm could not wonder at it. In the endless dogfight of the heavens, which were thick with them, they were flying together sometimes in exact collision, as happens sometimes in the atom-smashing cloud chambers, and screaming down, some dying, dead and dark drowsy somehow, and utterly dumb. Though turns called wise and beautiful songs sometimes, and some listened, and many flew in bold formations in the blue, waterless ocean plains up there, and in the dark green sea floats fishermen use. And storms came, and scrapyards spread bronze and extraneous at the city's edge, when there was no way out of the city, and the green parks were dry, and people just moved in the streets in the rain. Cries there held out there on the grey news. War, mostly war and little conflicts and threats of it. Never the good news, or hardly ever that. Ants pulled off their brothers' wings, did they? And it's all so tired here in the city, no way out of it, of the dust, the noise. And Einstein stood at the window. So much man, him, with open eyes and arms open, and so much Christ, see, always in the wish to reach out, times so much Christ see in the sensitivity of his hands. And he showed me so much E equals mc squared. And I couldn't understand, and could a little. And he said, no war. No, not this window for more falling and maiming. Fresh faces and bright eyes, he said. The bright side stays bright here always, where nothing moves. They know no other love than maiming the lights of eyes and the minds behind them and the skies behind the eyes. Hiroshima should be the shock and the admonition, and Hiroshima, after the shock, city built up and given utterly to peace, should be the pointing hand, uttering no more Hiroshimas as this was. Einstein died, but the mind breathes still on the breathless world. A change has taken place in his eyes. A dream broke out on the still calm as he sailed there in the peaceful end. This miracle, held in the atoms of one stone, yearns for a just fame. This miracle exists for the apocalypse, is for the wonderful song of war, to bring war all together to an end, and much other also together to an end. You, singing early in the morning, shook dust from the high window. Don't cry then, my leader, that the birds hear you. Maiming and hewing down is the dear, necessary beauty of the world. Often the solitary miner knows not what treasure he has found. Part 3. This is the dream I dreamt at midnight when there was silence in the cities. I saw a magnificent cross borne aloft and tied up with light, an intensely bright beam of wood decorated all over with gold. And I, guilty of crimes and wounded with them, saw this emblem adorned with streaming lights, shining most beautifully and decorated with gold. I was afraid of this weird cross which seemed to fluctuate with streams of light and colours of all kinds. Now it was misted over with moisture, drenched with flowing sweat and blood. Now it gleamed with precious things, constantly changing. But through that gold, in spite of its splendour, I could perceive the former agony of Christ, so that on its right side the cross seemed to sweat with blood. And through that cross I saw also the present despair of Christ, hesitant and half redelivered to the earth, the right side of his face running with perspiration. And through that I saw the actual decay of his body underground, as any man's transmutation in the soil's dark, pressing down on the ribs. And then I saw the history of the cross, scored deep in a black sky since Christ. And the earth grew up like a child and aged like an old man, and children were born, and there were mouths to feed, and hunger was a word written in every book. I saw them invent in the crucible bread and meat for the meat hall, grains of rice and bolts and vitamin pills poured from the same machines. And there were more mouths to feed, new young and the held old, and still the gutters ran with blood and perspiration, and green bottles lay broken in the hedgerows. At the same time, I could see hundreds of smiling and careless mothers littering the world, and laws to govern birth decreed in all countries and wilfully broken down, and children littering the world. The death of her brothers was not so much anguish to Badahilda as her own predicament, that clearly she was with child. She was too shocked even to think clearly what might happen if everybody that has passed so may this. I saw 50 years double this in festa, as the mothers still smiled and still cared less, and the earth, shrinking daily from within, ransacked for corn, and famines and troubles and crowd-packed rooms. A chemist looked up from his glass city, smiling benignly, saying, "In this flask I hold the rosiness of apples. I have made it in the dark. The sun's only good for sunburn on the seashore." Today, I saw a man in a white coat crushed beneath a tram. My dream shuddered and shook horribly in my head. When I was inside the mountain moved, and my sleep was shattered. I woke up speechless, hearing a man screaming in the distance, and found even awake I moved, still in a photographic dream. There were many of us at that time, lumbering up a white hill, made it seemed of moon splinters, and a cross stood on the hill's top, but some of us were too weary to go on. I opened my knapsack of books and settled down to read, in spite of the noise of breathing everywhere. And my book was the story of the Black Death. 42 million dead in 15 years, 2/3 of Europe. No matter whose foot stamped on that patch of earth, or whose hand extinguished so many fires at random, it was wonderfully done. It came from the east, but no matter, all things come from the east, which emulate the sun. So rose in brilliant emulation, fresh longing for life and eager cities built the Renaissance in the dense, dead continent. A sudden concentration on lost cults, old mines reworked, and new gold, new diamonds picked out, cut, polished, and laid bright in huge temples and museums designed to recognize the salvation of the race risen out of the pain and the horror of the Black Death. Yet, not a universal purge, nor was the flood a universal purge, nor was the whip in Zion a universal purge, nor was the Black Death. I know There will never be a universal purge until the galaxies collapse upon themselves in the billion blinding future. Never a star-wide purge in our time, only impermanent cleansing of the world's bullion. A land here, another land, and then, if only some pristine flamethrower would throw flame over the little brown towns down there, and set up after everywhere an aluminium city, and yet somehow leave the green fields, the mountains, and the lambs. If only the sea were green all down to the sea's bed, and no dreadnoughts, tins, and wrecks clutter the marine forests, however much the sharks need dark dens to hide in. Then, down there our city could begin, and down there our grass be green, and our bodies immunized against the grey pollution of the air, and the rusty edges which make the blood flow. No more graters. Melt the North Pole and the South, someone, is the cry. Flood the lands, and let the only ark be that of men Pacific. Out of this maelstrom, how to choose sound occupants is the entire agony before we ourselves crack the shins of Atlas. Hiroshima, warned of the latest affliction to scorch the ill plains and the green sea. And Christ shall lead a wonderful destruction, as he led the deluge, walking in the green rain and walking on the waters left there thereafter, and walking under the dove, and in the temple, and in the black death, and in the sun which shone there thereafter, and in the Red Cross crusades, and in Einstein's mind, undermining war's cause and the reason for it, and in Hiroshima, and now, coming soon hereafter, here after Hiroshima came, and Christ shall lead this wonderful destruction, for it shall come, this utter blitz of the leading cities, for minds have delegated power to engines fallible as minds, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and great glory in the cloud above each city, and the earth shall be cleansed somewhere, and the scourge scour the land deepest yet, spreading invisible, insidious murder in the man's blood, visibly struck down, vomiting, hair falling out, and blotches on the skin, and slow decline rising from the fallout in the wind, and great glory. 60,000 dead in Hiroshima in the flash of it. 60,000 more dying in the homeless weeks when Geiger forbade return, and altogether 2 million less to breadwin. Human hand in Nagasaki, bedded in the melted glass of green bottles, our new amber. I have stood in Hiroshima's pristine tomb, seen specimens of human skin torn by a boy in body blitz from his red, raw limbs, and feces on the clinic steps, no different from the living and the dead. And they put flour on their wounds, and the flour dried, and the flesh, and no way to whip off the fast pain. I am utterly out of dream. This was Japan in 1945 when I was 6. And Hiroshima is my God. And I love my God and ask my God, come and burn up the cities, Lord. Come now, while the city's air burns up and communities sigh. Come, there's no way out of the city. Burn up the dried up streets. I fear not, my city, I fear not. Surely the way to prepare the way is surely to fear not. Christ comes. Accept the Holocaust of millions. Christ is this entire war, come to cleanse and salve and create air after and song in the air that is clean and saved and creative as the sea wind. For the rain will wash the stones, and fishermen shall float out there always where there's sea for fishes, and men Pacific living on the green shores, and bread enough for the hungry, and no hunger, until again the land no more can breathe in the city air, till cities creep down into the quiet bays and to the sheltered coves. I would choose to take my end as children take their end, as Toshio Nakamura, boy of 10. The day before the bomb, I went for a swim. In the morning, I was eating peanuts. I saw a light. I was knocked to little sister's sleeping place. When we were saved, I could only see as far as the tram. My mother and I started to pack our things. The neighbors were walking round, burned and bleeding. Hataya-san told me to run away with her. I said I wanted to wait for my mother. We went to the park. A whirlwind came. At night, a gas tank burned. I saw the reflection in the river. Seeing their reflections in the river, cities hurt me. How much more may cities hurt me when I see their ashes join the wind. Then some of us will have to join the caravan, guiding the treasures of the race across the earth, the deserts, until a land's found, rain-washed enough and ready for the blue sky, when Geiger's silent. Every mirage shall project the ruin on the sky in the first year after, and we shall meet dumb emigrants racing across the desert from the distant dust. There shall be fear in their eyes. They found the sea salt. It will be tears in their eyes. And those who came back from the moon wept tears of white dust when Khrushchev said, "Our spacemen scoured all the wide expanses of the sky and found no trace of God anywhere there." But listen, now, for I may not be there later. There are islands somewhere, and fishermen singing there. I hear them cry welcome over the still waters. There, I will think of pebbles, of green ponds on the seashore, and sea urchins. Fishermen there shall fish from longboats. Now say this, for later you may not be there. I shall think of the silent floating, and I shall think of dolphins. Sit with me by the seashore, watching, and watch the stillness of the fishing boats. Then you shall see the miracle of the sun rising and the sun shining down, and our single ditty shall be heard. Save the sunshine in the green ring of our lifetime. Take a pebble in your hand, shining with the sun in the water upon the smooth stone, and gaze there, filled with swan-mute wonder. And gaze there at the night sky. No further urge the mind out of the green ring of this present time. Einstein told me, what does a fish know of the sea he swims in? Thought is a drop of flesh in the skull. I give you thought of the city, and a city to think in, as Finnish echoes in the wind now, as Christ beckons and comes singing in the crimson clouds.